I most probably had my first heart attack the day that they announced that Canada is closing. I ran that business with my heart, not with my head. Literally, it was my last chance in life.
What's the biggest risk you have taken in your business venture?
So 100% of our efforts was how can we take the best decision in lending without losing money. That partner got very scared during COVID.
What does success mean to you?
We created a product that has been used by hundreds of thousands of borrowers. My $6,000 to start this business, it was my last $6,000 I had. I was refused for a Toyota. I need to be very careful with how I manage my gas.
Can you give us a quick view what went wrong that you had to give up that?
You need people to work as employees as well. I need gas to get to my next milestone.
Hey Charlie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Frank?
Good. Hope all is well in the early summer.
Yes.
Glad we were able to find some time to sit down today just to chat about your experience, your business. I think that will be beneficial to a lot of audiences. So first, for our audience that do not know you yet, could you give a quick introduction? Who are you? So what you are doing?
Absolutely. So I'll start with a bit of history. Obviously, I am born in Canada, raised in Canada, and studied and grew up here. But I come from a family that immigrated from Lebanon and Syria. And money was always something that was not widely present, being first-generation immigrants. So I grew up with a family that always was on budget, which leads me to the point where the family was always pushing for education. And I understood very quickly that education without a plan will not yield you much. So I followed a path that I guess is slightly different from a lot of people, where I tried to study things that I could put in practice, and that led me to finance. So my first job in finance was obviously in a bank as a teller, and I did about 6 years of banking, where I slowly grew up from a teller to a lending advisor. And in that position, obviously, we were doing mortgages. It got me to understand how lending works in Canada, and that is something that always tickled my mind, because there is a lot of things I saw that I didn't feel were optimized. However, working in banking, you're in a machine that is so big that it's almost impossible to make changes. Following that experience in banks, I decided to start a business on my own, and that was my first business, and it was a call center where we actually catered to different industries. And following actually, that business didn't work out at all. And following that, I decided to take the experience I got in banking and the experience we had in call centers, and I merged that all together to get us to where we are now.
Oh, okay. So when was your call center business?
2014 to 2018.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, you ran a business for 4 years. That means you had certain success, right?
It had great success. I think as a first-time business owner, I made mistakes that later on started taking place, and it got that business to a point where it was not profitable. And it's kind of the reason why I started the business we're in today, because I went through very hard times, and I understood that when you go through hard times in Canada and you claim bankruptcy or anything like that, you get excluded from the entire ecosystem for 7 years. And this is the idea that got me to create Westgate.
Can you tell us a little about your current business? So what's your main products? Who do you serve?
Sure. So Westgate by itself is a holding that operates a business that is quite complex. Part one is it's a platform that allows underwriting that is very different than how banks underwrite. And I would say that's the core of our business. So we have created a loan origination platform that doesn't use credit scores to lend money to consumers. That technology has been deployed in different type of lending, whether it's short-term consumer loans. We've done it for medical loans, and we're hoping to expand to bigger loans, kind of like Go Easy and some of the bigger players in the installment lending market.
No. Okay, great. So can you tell us a little bit how large your business is right now, and how large is the operation here?
Sure. So as far as headcount, we're in the 40 to 50 people range. That is including people that are directly working with us, and some people that we have on consultancy basis, but that is very recurring. Like example, the risk team, we have on staff that are full-time, and we also go to industry experts and we get their expertise to build stuff. So overall, I would say we have about 40 to 50 people headcount. We operate through 3 or 4 different countries, all servicing the Canadian market. But we have our developers are in Venezuela. We have people in Lebanon. We have people in the Philippines for customer service. And we have some people in the States as well.
Oh, okay. Great. So how do you find the experience to manage people literally across the world?
It's a very good question. My experience has been very bad in some aspects of things, but also very good in multiple other aspects. I think offshoring requires a type of skill that is different from regular management. The one thing I can tell you is, from my experience, there's no shortage of smart people there might be a shortage of smart people in Canada, but there is no shortage across the globe. So when you go and you pick up people that have specific skills, I don't think it really matters where they are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big believer of remote work for some parts of the operation, but I think there are positions where you can get insane talent by crossing borders and talking to people out of your comfort zone. I could say my experience is very positive when it comes to offshoring.
Oh, good to hear. So obviously the technology these days allows us to able to really tap into talents anywhere in the world. So glad to see you are pioneering that and enjoy some benefits. So you talk about your current business. So in landing, how long does it take you to make this business profitable?
Okay, so we started operating in 2018, and that includes the time where we were building the platform, which was an MVP. So in the beginning, we went to different firms. We told them, okay, this is the idea that we have, and we want to find a way to approve clients without credit scores. And we found out a company called Flinks that provides raw bank data. And I had the idea, before even knowing that some other lenders were using it, to say, no, you know what? There is a need in this marketplace to have an underwriting that is more inclusive and that is more accurate. So while I didn't know about APIs, I hired a developer to help us just assemble the minimum parts required. I must thank Flinks a million times, because they were one of the first ones that believed in the project. And so we started 2018, we started building in May. We issued the first loan officially in October. And let me tell you, it was a complete mess at the beginning. Nothing went to plan. Literally nothing went to plan. We created a product that competes with payday loans. And the concept we had thought is, because it's a last resort loan, the default would be inexistent. I can tell you, we were very wrong. And we started with such little capital that within the first 4 weeks, we had run out of capital.
May I ask how much capital you had prepared?
$10,000, $12,000.
Okay.
$6,000 from myself, $6,000 from my partner at that time. It didn't take very long before we needed to raise money, and we ended up going to investors with the idea. And obviously that was very hard. We tried to knock at banks, and banks did not want to hear it. We tried to reach out to existing lenders that do alternative lending using conventional underwriting, and those were not open. I could tell you that it took about 2 to 3 years after we were in business for some bigger lenders to start getting interested, simply because Flinks were able to use us as ambassadors for the bank verification program.
Okay, so it's bad in the sense you run out of capital pretty quickly, but it's also a good thing at the same time you verify that there is a demand for your products, right?
Exactly. The product market fit, I could tell you, it took literally 3 days because we started advertising online, and I was expecting to receive maybe a few requests a day, and it was literally like it started coming in at a pace that was even abnormal. Like I thought maybe it's all fake or it's test, it's the developers sending tests, but it ended up being real clients that needed the loans.
How long do you stick to your current capital until you have some additional funding from external source?
We had our first round of funding in December of that same year. We got the capital in January and we started operating with that capital. It was about $100,000 and that allowed us to at least have a portfolio that is recurring. And this is a very crucial period of the business because we had no cash. We could not afford losing money. We were on the last track to develop product that makes sense and that is scalable. So 100% of our efforts was how can we take the best decision in lending without losing money. Our model was focused on we cannot afford to lose money. And I think this was a very important piece of the success. We started with that first $100,000. We were able to re-raise another few $100,000 in the same year. And we ran for about a year with that capital. And the second year, we doubled the amount of capital we had. And then fast forward 2020 came. It was the apocalypse, but we survived through it and actually we learned a lot from COVID.
Actually, let's talk a little about that. So when the COVID hit, so more than 3 years ago, everything came to a halt, literally. So what's your business experience during the first few months?
I most probably had my first heart attack the day that they announced that Canada is closing. For about 2 weeks, I was in large panic mode. Our first reflex was to shut down entire operations. We laid off all our part-time agents that we had, and we went back to having 2 to 4 employees that we carried on for most of that part. But most importantly, after I relaxed and got back on earth, I realized that maybe this would be a very good time to do a rewrite of the software and to focus on the technology. So we used that period to actually rebuild a lot of the infrastructure that we had built in the beginning, just patching things. I would say the time off we had during COVID allowed us to just build features that we didn't have time to build while we were lending.
No, great. Really, you're able to leverage that time to really invest in your infrastructure. Did you see any difficulty from your customers to pay back the loan at that time?
Actually, we saw the complete opposite. So when my stress level was at the highest, my prediction was that nobody would ever pay because it seemed like the end of the world. However, I must be thankful for whatever government did, and they created the SERP program, which allowed to buy time for a lot of people. And for my business, I would say it was the complete opposite. Clients that were not paying in the past started paying during COVID, and a lot of the things we anticipated were going to happen did not happen. Some of my biggest bets were that real estate was going to collapse, and actually surprisingly since that time it almost doubled.
We knew that, right?
Exactly. So all this to say, I think COVID allowed a lot of businesses in lending to thrive because the government injected so much money that ended up helping lenders sustain the models, because otherwise I think it would have collapsed the entire economy.
Yeah, at that time I still remember all the big banks in both US, Canada, they have a predicted spike of loss, right? So by as much as 60% or 80%. I'm just glad that we were all wrong.
Correct. Yeah, for that part, absolutely. Surprisingly, during COVID, I told you in the beginning that I had a partner when I started the business. That partner got very scared during COVID. So it also gave me the opportunity to buy back the shares. Pre-COVID, we were not profitable at all. And when COVID happened, what gave me the confidence to buy the shares was we got to the point where clients were paying and we were not issuing new loans. So when I realized, obviously we didn't have accounting at that time, it was brand new operation. But when I realized that we had in our bank account more money than what we owed investors, then I said, you know what, we might be on the right track. So that this gave me the confidence to buy back the business because
business of the venture. You mentioned your first business did not survive even after 4 years hard work. Can you give us a quick view what went wrong so that you had to give up that business eventually?
I think a lot went wrong. I ran that business with my heart, not with my head. A lot of the decisions I took were based on trying to do what's the easiest route, which is hire friends, family, things that when things go bad, you're not taking the rational decision because you are involved with family that will also lose jobs. And I think this got me to a point where I lost control on being able to pull the plug. So when things started to slide and business became sour, my first reflex was, no, we're going to use leverage. We're going to use credit. It's going to pass and things are going to get better. But let me tell you, it was not the case. We started losing some clients and it only went downhill from there.
Sometimes you have to make a tough call at the end.
Exactly. Well, I didn't make the tough call because I was trying to avoid the worst case scenario, but it happened even worse than the worst case scenario. So all that to say, when we closed the previous business in 2018, I had to go through a consumer proposal. And on my personal credit, I was completely unbanked. And on the business side, it was a complete bankruptcy, like literally not even, we left that business with not even a penny.
Were you able to get access to some credit card, for example, the regular
No.
financing tool?
No, at all. Actually, up until today, I still have a very hard time to get credit. Not long ago, I was refused for a cell phone with Telus. Up to 2 weeks ago, I was refused for a Toyota for a lease, simply because I went through a consumer proposal in 2018. And while I must admit, those are things that on an ego perspective, it pisses me off today because I know I'm widely capable to pay for those things. But it's just the way the credit system is. But it fuels me because it proves my point that our current system excludes a lot of people from credit. And I think banks are in a philosophy of too big to fail, so they're not focused on innovating. And actually, from my perspective, I don't think they really care about building products that includes people. They are more focused on protecting shareholders and getting the best performance for their shareholders. But I understand, but I think it's creating a lack entire ecosystem.
Yeah, it's just ironic that you're extending hundreds of $1,000s loans, but you cannot get a loan for yourself.
Exactly. Last week when they refused me at Toyota, even the lady said, when I had access to the financials, I thought this was going to be the easiest file I ever had. He's like, but I'm absolutely sorry, there is nothing that could be done. We cannot lease you that car.
Sorry to hear that. But at the same time, yeah, that does mean opportunities are still out there, right? So for whoever want to, serve this credit business.
Absolutely. Our biggest bet is that credit scores, and as much as I love Equifax as a company, I don't think that a score with 3 digits can say who you are. And if you have very good credit, all I can tell you is most probably you have not been through very hardships. But I don't think it's a fair indicator of somebody's capacity to repay or the intent to repay. And that's why our entire business mindset is how can we create underwriting models that will get the right person that has the capacity and the intent to pay to repay.
So when you think about your business, so in the society, what do you think the biggest value your business provides?
It's a very good question. I think the main goal for us is to be able to service all type of borrowers from subprime all the way to prime borrowers. However, we don't have the capital, or we didn't have the capital when we got started. So we started with a niche that is in the subprime industry. But my goal is, well, actually, my dream is to one day have a bank or a significant lender that will take a look at what we've built and say, you know what, we've been underwriting wrong. We've been leaving a lot of money on the table, and we've been refusing a lot of people that should not be refused. So the vision is that one day we'll be able to service all type of borrowers with different spectrum of credit.
Great. And if you combine your professional activity and your personal life, what does success mean to you?
I love the question. I think a lot of people associate success to money, and I would say it's 25% the money, because to me, I see money as gas. I need gas to get to my next milestone. So I need to be very careful with how I manage my gas to be sure I can get to the next step. Ultimately, what makes me feel successful is when I put milestones and we reach them. This brings success. when I see that we created a product that has been used by hundreds of thousands of borrowers, I think this shows success. I think success is just being able to think about something, getting it done, and see the result that it's done. Because from my perspective, a lot of people tell me that they want to do a lot of things, but they don't put it in action. So to answer your question in a more direct way, I think success to me is gauged by having an idea, being able to do it, and the outcome of it is, if you're happy with the results, you're successful. And that's different from one person to another. Some people, they like sports, and to them success is being very good at the sport. Some people it's strictly money, some people it's success at school. But to me, it's just being able to realize things that I've been wanting to do forever.
Obviously, being an entrepreneur is challenging in a lot of ways. For your kids, do you want them to be entrepreneurs at one day?
We can talk about kids, and actually I have a lot of kids in my family, not just kids, like cousins, younger cousins. The one thing I can say, it's not for everybody. As much as I like to promote entrepreneurship, you need people to work as employees as well. We all have different risk tolerances. So my advice to younger people is, if you know that this is the route that you want to take and you're able to put the sacrifice, go for it. But it's not the only way of succeeding in life. For a lot of people, it just doesn't work. Like I know very smart people that would never be able to have that risk on their shoulders. And I know some people that it's the complete opposite. They would rather have nothing and try to build something than to take a job.
Good advice. Really, you need to know yourself to make the best decision for your own path, right?
The one thing I'm going to emphasize on, no matter what young people think, when you look at something that's successful, whether it's a person, a business, you only see the tip of the iceberg. You have no clue what went in the back end. And one thing I can tell you is I am very confident that in most of those cases, there was a lot of sacrifice that was done that you don't see.
What's the biggest risk you have taken in your business venture?
Very honestly, when we started the business, we put $12,000, me and my partner, so $6,000 each. When I transferred my $6,000 to start this business, it was my last $6,000 I had. So I made sure my mom was able to help me pay with some expenses. My girlfriend had luckily started a new job, so she was able to get a steady payroll. And yeah, it was a pretty stupid and crazy risk that paid off, because literally it was my last chance in life. And for the first year and a half of the business, I could not even afford nothing. I had a toothache for almost a year and a half that I could not even afford to fix. So the risk of business is, when you have a job, you know that every week you will get paid. It makes everything very predictable. When you start the business specifically, you can predict as much as you want, but nothing comes with what you predicted most of the time. So it requires the skill of being able to adapt to situations and make the best outcome with what you have.
So at that time, you bet all you have, but it's also a bet on yourself, right? Yeah, so I'm glad to see that bet eventually pays off.
Yeah, it was a bet against all odds, because I had just came back from the previous business. I had declared the consumer proposal. I had no more money. In the previous business we had lost money. So it was not a situation where I had comfort. And I think this is something that helped us build what we have today. We're just very good at doing the best with very little.
Great. Let's look forward. What are the some of the key projects you are working on for your next 12 months to 18 months?
We're working on a lot of things, and the way I like to run my business is I run it as if we have multiple businesses on the inside, and this has been something that worked very well for me. We now have a team, so we create projects and then we dedicate a team to work on it. A high percentage of projects, it fails before it even gets to the release date. But something that's very interesting that we're working on is, I told you that we built an origination platform, which is very good. We are missing the part of the loan management system. So one of the projects is we're looking at either acquiring an existing loan management platform to integrate and follow the vision of what we built on the origination side. So that's one project. We're actually evaluating whether we are buying something that exists or we are building it from scratch. that is a major project. That's step one. Step two, we're looking at expanding the current services that we offer to the States. And we found out that in the US, there is an ecosystem of lenders that don't even lend themselves. They use companies to service the portfolios. So we are approaching a lot of lenders, and we are being approached by some lenders to service portfolios that are existing, also leveraging models that we built. So I would say the US is a market that I would love to open, and that would be the secondary part of what we're working on. The third part, and one of the most important, is we're making a big bet on efficiency. So we're also doing a rewrite and creating more features on the existing platforms that we have.
In the US, are there particular geographic areas you are looking at, or is it really across the whole nation?
So in the US, the landscape is very different because in Canada, the federal decides what the criminal interest rate is, and then provinces can create legislation around lending. In the States, each state has its own usury rate and their own set of rules. So to be able to service the US at large is very complicated, but there are states that allow licensing that is much easier, and we're taking the route of entering in the markets that are easy to get in.
Canada is a neighbor country of US, but also it's a different country. How do you manage the interaction with your business contacts? Do you travel very often, or how do you approach that?
For the Canada operations, I could most probably count the amount of times I needed to travel. We are very close to our suppliers, and luckily our main supplier is in Quebec. Some of our suppliers are on the West Coast. It happened more often that they had to travel, so we met very often either in Quebec or Ontario. So the traveling for Canada was not that much. I am, however, finding out that for the US, it's been quite more intensive in terms of flying. And obviously, like you might do a deal with a company that is in one state, but their head office is in another state. And I think it requires a lot more travel. And one thing I can tell you is their ecosystem is very different than ours in a lot of ways. So far, I was able to make very good contact on the other side of the border. And surprisingly, there is a lot of lenders that view Canada as advanced when it comes to lending. And one thing I can tell you from the last few trade shows that I attended, there is a lot of lending being done in the States that would correspond to technology that we had here in the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
So I am very confident that we can replicate our underwriting methodology there and do quite well.
Okay, good to hear. So for Canadian folks, don't feel too bad sometimes about what do you have here.
Exactly. The one thing that is very similar from both countries, regulatory environments are very slow to respond. So if you need specific questions, or if you're trying to get licenses, in Canada, it takes a lot of time. Like example, if you want to start the payday lending business and you want to get licensed in Ontario, if you are lucky, we're talking 6 months. And this is without having any back and forth. So in the States, so far, we're trying to acquire our first license in Texas, and we're almost at month 3 of the process. So regulatory environment is complicated when it comes to finance in both countries.
For your Texas business, is there any local professional service company that help you to navigate that landscape?
Yeah, our first reflex is to take a law firm that specializes in the industry that we're trying to get into for the state that we're trying to get into. Luckily, by attending some of the lending shows, you make those contacts and it helps streamline the process. We were very fortunate to have met the lawyer that knew the industry inside out, that knew the regulators inside out, and that is helping us to get started there.
Oh, great. For the audience who might be interested, what industry events have you gone to, or would you recommend?
For Canada, I would say there is the Canadian Lender Association that do events across Canada that are quite interesting. They're not in the same size of the ones in the States, but you'll make good contacts there. The one thing I noticed in the States, the events are much bigger. So in the States, I attended the Lens Week conference so far, which was a great success. We made a lot of contacts there. We met a lot of people that are helping us get started in the US. We are attending Lend 360 that is in October. also an interesting industry show. And I've heard Money 2020 in Vegas is also quite well. I have not attended those yet, but they are in our pipeline. Another industry that we are largely taking a look at is the tribal lending industry. And they also have their own shows. They are regulated by the Online Lending Association. That's the name of the association. And they also have shows that are spread across the states. I think their next one is in November in California.
Those are some great places to visit.
Yeah, exactly.
Great, thanks for sharing the information. For you to reach your business goals, are there any particular areas you could use some help right now?
Absolutely. We are a startup, so I still consider myself a startup. And I would say good talent is always welcome. The main place that I think you've seen us work on some projects, I believe in data science a lot. We're always trying to scout people that can think out of the box. So because we land with methodology that is not conventional, I always like to get the unconventional people that are extremely smart to help us build models. And the best people I found are to help us were people that live in countries where conventional credit bureaus don't exist, and where you're left with just data points to come up with lending decisions. And this has been very good. People that live, like example, in China, in South America, actually in most of Latin America, you will have a lot of lenders that don't use conventional scoring models, but they will use different data points to take decisions. And I find that when we leverage that type of people, they understand what we're trying to accomplish, and oftentimes they already did it. So they come up with ideas that we don't think of here.
If people want to get in touch with you for any potential collaboration or business opportunity, so how they can reach you?
I would say LinkedIn. I typically like to do business with people that are referred to people that we know. So if you know someone I know and they can do an intro, that is probably the best way to be in contact with us.
Okay, so is that also the same approach you are approaching your prospects?
Correct. So example, suppliers, it will be the same. As we're trying to launch a business in the States, I will reach out to my network and I will call you. I will say, hey, Frank, do you know somebody that works at that place or in that industry? And I found that when I go to references, it creates a sense of trust, first of all, that is much easier. And you get feedback from somebody that knows someone, and it's not just a random company. The few times that we ventured out and we just blindly picked suppliers, we had some very, very, very terrible experiences.
Yeah, it's always to go through some warm intro, right? So people know both sides, so make sure it's a good fit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great.
As an example, I think you've introduced us to Beam Data, and I can say Beam Data has done some phenomenal work. We have tried different type of entities, and they were good. I cannot say the others were not good, but I didn't feel like there was that proximity that we had with Beam Data that got us to be able to create a product with them.
Okay, good to hear that my intro, works for you.
Well, oftentimes the soft intros or the warm intros, if we can call them that way, have worked very well. Like I'll give you an example. I had tried to get in contact with Equifax for a long time, and it circled, and then you opened the door and it wasn't the right contact, but in some way we ended up having the right contact to be able to push things forward. So sometimes it just takes somebody that knows someone that opens the door, and it changes the entire outcome.
Yeah, make sure we have the shortest path, right, to get it.
Exactly.
Great to catch up with you, Charlie. Glad to hear that you have a big plans ahead of you beyond Canada. All the best with your efforts. Maybe in 6 months or 12 months later, we can touch base again and to see how your business is doing. Fingers crossed.
Okay. Absolutely. Thank you so much.